often imagine success as a straight line. Study hard, get a good job, climb the ladder. For Mai Doan, life began that way. She grew up in prosperity in District 3 in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, surrounded by opportunities, talent, and recognition. She won prizes, danced on stage in Thailand, and earned scholarship to study in the United States and even go to France. But life away from home brought a shift in identity. In the US, in Oregon, she worked on farms with berries and wine. In France, Aix-en-Provence, she was told she was too American. Later, back in Vietnam, she struggled with reversed culture shock and the harsh realities of finding work. And then an unexpected illness forced her to stop and rethink. It was in the forest of Dalat in Vietnam, sitting quietly among the trees, that she discovered something profound, that nature heals. That moment set her on a new path, from finance and equity and law to conservation and leadership. Today, as a COO of Conversation Vietnam and a member of the Melinda Gates Women Emerging Program, Mai is helping projects to protect endangered species, restore landscape, and nurture a new generation of women leaders in nature. This is Mosaic Mind, where we explore the fragments of identity, bold choices, and hidden stories that shape leadership. I'm your host, Mai Holland. Mai, welcome to Mosaic Mind. How are you today?
Thank you, Timmy. I'm doing very well. I'm very happy to be here with you today.
That's awesome. I can't wait for our chat today because I met you a few months ago in a cafe, and I really was so inspired by your stories, and because we were talking also about the Vietnamese pheasant and everything. So anyway, let's talk about it, in our conversation. So let's start with your early life and your sense of identity. So you said that you grew up in District 3 in the 1990s. And for people who don't know the District 3, those time, it's very, very nice, very prosperous area in Ho Chi Minh City. And I still love it now as well. So you grew up surrounded by prosperity, joy, family. So it's really nice. So if you really don't get it, if you live in Paris, it's a bit like Saint-Germain or the 8th arrondissement, or if you're in Tokyo, it's a bit like Ginza. Okay. So really classy. So can you tell us more about how that upbringing in that safe, very nice, pure upbringing shaped your sense of self, please?
Thank you, Timmy. So I find that I'm very lucky and have the privilege to born in a very peaceful time in Vietnam and growing up in such a nice area with my family, including my grandparents, my parents, and my aunt and uncle. So we lived all together, 3 generations, and I happen to be the very first child. Up until today, whenever we have a family gathering, everybody look at me and it brings them the wonderful memory of living all together. We don't live together anymore because each family grow, and now I also have my own family. But knowing that I'm having the privilege born in a very happy family shaped my identity as a good child, a good girl.
Yeah, and I really remember, because I really want to give that context for people. How you grew up, you were safe, everything is fantastic. Tick, tick, tick. You got the wish list for everything. You couldn't hope for better. And then I really want just for people to get that, so then we can really move to your journey with the different kind of challenges that you talked about. So basically, what you were saying, that life was easy, people love you, it's really nice place. And now that you're really looking back, we are 2025 now, what part of your childhood identity still lives in you today, in your heart today? What can you tell us about it?
My childhood memory give me the sense of we live in harmony with nature, because we had a very nice garden in our front yard with roses that my grandma grew, and even fruit trees. So we have a papaya tree in our backyard, that I grew with my grandma, and it gives us fruit in the summer. Um, we have a few chicken, as in my memory, and back in the we have to protect the chicken from the snake, and someday we even have like monkeys. When
Oh
I
my
was
God.
really small, we do remember I actually had a spend time with the monkey, and of course dogs and cats. And I play with the cedar in the backyard with my friends and my cousin. And there are beautiful nights when there's a full moon. We would do the lantern, watching the moon and hanging out all together. Yes. So
Like, it sounds like, you got really the perfect, the perfect upbringing, real lifestyle. So that is really, really great to hear. So I really want to ask you, a few questions about, when you went overseas, and then about your cultural shift, before you come back to Vietnam. So you have been this kind of prodigious child, you won scholarship, you perform overseas, you dance, etc. And then you also got your scholarship to go and study it in the US. And I think you spent 6 months or something in Aix-en-Provence. I mean, everybody loves Aix-en-Provence in France. So basically, you've been moving between Vietnam, Oregon in the US, and Aix-en-Provence. So can you tell us more about what was the biggest identity shift that you experienced during those years abroad? What happened there?
for my identity shift, moving from Vietnam to the US and then travel into France, it helped me to understand my culture, my family a lot better. Because as in Vietnam, just imagine that my grandparents back then they learned French. So my granddad speak French, and he named me Mai because I was born in the month of May. So he left. He wrote on the day I was born. He wrote on a piece of paper that come from the calendar that you have to flip every day. So in the back of the calendar, he said that like because I was born in the first child that is born after the war in the family, so he thinks of the happiness like the spring of the flower. Mai is a flower that represent the spring in Vietnam, but it's also the month of May because in his upbringing he was learning French. But then it's from my mom and my dad. They actually met at Russia during the time that there was a connection between Vietnam and Russia, and they was there to work and meet with each other. But then when I came back, and for me, growing up, I start learning English when I was 5, very early age. So in my family itself, we know that there are different country out there, different culture, and the fact that we all live together with different mindset inside my family, I already see there's different cultural identity. So that's what bring me the curious of stepping out of my comfort zone, stepping out of the country to study abroad. For me, it's also because I was the first child and I get a lot of expectation from all my family member. So I had to study very hard and study and also dance to be well rounded. And actually, it's the role model identity. So, role modeling for the younger ones in the family as the firstborn. I was role modeling for my classmate and even pick among the top student in the school to compete with other school. So being a role model is how I perceive myself. Like I have to be a good girl, I have to work hard and try to be better every day. But when I come to the state, nobody knows me, and my identity of being a role model, a good girl, shattered. Because when nobody knows me, I can be anything. I can be anyone. So my identity shift was from being you have to be a good girl and you have to be living in a certain way that you role modeling for others, and you shift to America and you can be free to be who you are and do what you
And
like.
then exactly. And then I remember you mentioned that when you arrived in the US, things were so different because you have to do everything. by yourself. So can you tell us a bit more about that shift? Because you got that when you went to the US, where you discovered that, oh my gosh, you have to do everything by yourself. Things get done. And then you spent 6 months in France. And then things were different again because people saw you to American, you know? So how do you navigate between all those different version of yourself? How do you navigate all those culture adaptation?
So from Vietnam to America, I have a new identity, and I get to choose to be who I am again. That's the freedom come with the price. Because in America, I start out live with the host family who knows that I need to spend time for school, but they also ask me to support in a family together as a family member. So I didn't know how to do my laundry. I had to learn to use the laundry machine. And I get to pick a chore that I would do after school. And I think I chose to do vacuuming. And so here in the US, I do not have to be anyone's role model, but I get to be part of a new community. And in order to adapt to a new culture, new environment, starting again it means that I I have to learn what other people are doing and learn as fast as I can.
Yeah.
Back then we didn't have internet like this, and my parents couldn't call me unless they have to go through a phone, an IP phone that would connect to my host family phone because we didn't have cell phone back then either.
Yeah. I remember that time.
And then it's because there's no families there and no friends. So I have to start getting to know people, observing how they are doing in the new culture, and then catch up with that. And then it struck again with me for when I'm moving to France. It's another culture. Right now I cannot remember how I did it, but I think to altogether is when you come to a new place and new culture, just remembering that you can always start it over from nobody. I think it's all come back to being nobody again and gradually building up.
I'm so happy that you talked about you grew up in a protective area family where it's super safe, and then you're the role modeling for everyone, and then you did really well in the US as well, and then you had that promising career in finance and equity, and you made a lot of money. And I remember you mentioned to me that was easy. But then something happened. So you were sick and you had that illness. And I really want if you're happy to share about this, about that moment of vulnerability, that truth, which brought you closer to nature. So you went to Dalat, and then something happened there, because after this, you committed yourself, your life and your career journey to conservation of Vietnam. Can you tell us back? Can you give us a bit more insight about, that shift from safe money career, in equity, to really moving to conservation of Vietnam?
Very successful education time, and just one success after another. I land my job in the US with a large corporate. I did make a lot of money there. So I was confident to come back to Vietnam with a big saving. I thought of opening my own company, but at that time, I see there's a need in the market for people that can break the gap for the language and the culture to support the financial growth of Vietnam. So I start out my career in finance as an advisor assistant, where I help companies in Vietnam to search for international investor to invest in Vietnam. I grow my career from the sell side to the buy side. So later in my financial career, I worked for a private equity fund that would search for the local business to invest. And my investment experience was in education, healthcare, agriculture, logistics, and real estate. So there are all the very major investment that grow in the past 10 years of Vietnam. The project has become, there are a few projects that fell, but there are also many projects that became very successful and we got rewarding as a financial team, and my career advanced together with that up until I moved to my next career path in real estate as a director of capital market. Actually, the youngest female leader in my team back then, where I got support from the teammates that in Singapore and India that report to me, and I'm presenting the Vietnam companies to gain the investment from overseas. That also give me the opportunity to talk to a lot of the large investor. And when I speak to them, I understand the need for environment sector, that they would not spend money on the project without caring for the environment. So that sparked my interest in learning what is the environment in Vietnam is about. And I found that we do not have so many primary forests anymore because much land has been converted in order to support the country development. For me, I already had the experience growing near the primary forest, so I understand the importance of spending time in the forest, and the forest can mean so much with the ecosystem. So I was stuck in between two identity. One is a successful career woman that can make a lot of money, that can be part of very big deals in Vietnam, that I always wanted to be part of, following the career path in finance. The other identity is about the young girl back then that want to explore the world and be the connection for the development of Vietnam itself. And then I found out that I'm in between, and whether am I doing finance to support the country, or I'm doing finance that actually causing harm to the environment, to nature that's so precious to Vietnam. During that time, I found out that I also got a tumor growing inside, and it's right by my face here. And back then, because of identity as the successful woman, I thought that, okay, if I just cover this part, I can keep going to work and following my career path without nobody knows. There's an ego there that stopped me from doing what I want. But then the tumor has grown so big, and my doctor said that if I just keep killing myself like that, then then my face will got paralyzed. So I did the surgery, and my face did got paralyzed. Half of my face was paralyzed. And for identity as a successful career woman, I cannot continue work with half face paralyzed, right? That's why I decided to start meditation, but it was actually a time to escape from the city. So I got to Dalat, and back and in Dalat, I was in the Shivananda yoga meditation, where we just take time to learn how to heal ourselves from within. I felt the difference because it's on my face, and I can feel it. So I know that when I'm not so stressed, and I can reimagine that my face can come back to normal, somehow the nerve system can reach out to each other and help me to heal. And nowadays, many scientists also has proven that it is true. You can manifest, you can call it manifestation or meditation, healing, projection. You can call it any names. But when your body is relaxed and you have a purpose, then your body will support you. So at that time in Dalat, the moment I see the sunrise, I know that it's the time to manifest my wish. So I said to myself that if I get my face back to normal again, I would use my voice, my ability, my talents to speak for nature and for those who cannot speak for themselves, such as our precious endangered species or animals in general of Vietnam.
Wow, that was powerful. And I really wanted you to share that story, to inspire people, just to say that nature inspires us and nature heals. So, which, thank you very much for sharing your personal stories here. And I really want to link it to your conservation work now. So Conservation Vietnam is working on incredible projects. So you mentioned to me last time from pangolin to pheasant to releasing Siamese crocodiles. Which project has touched your heart the most? Mai, I mean, I'm sure they're all important, but which one really, wow you?
We are currently in Conservation Vietnam. We have invested in 5 projects and a total of 11 species that are endangered or critically endangered. Now, it has been 3.5 years for me, and every species of wildlife has a story that I would love to share because it touches my heart, every one of them, especially when I get to connect to myself, connect to my identity as a mother, and see how the mom in nature are very caring for their children and very protective and nurturing at the same time. I can name a few, such as the red-shanked in Da Nang. The moment I saw the species in person and learned that they carry their child for a whole year to protect their child, the newborn child. It was very touching because as a mother, holding my babies for a certain amount of time can be exhausting. And there's a nature that caring so much for the babies and the pangolin itself too. So I've heard story of the pangolin when they rescue in Cú Phương in the north. The pangolin mom that got her hand cut off, so she can never return to nature. But because she was pregnant with her baby at that time and later gave birth to the baby, and she taught her child to hunt in nature. So then the child was able to release while she is kept in the rescue center for the rest of her life. It's also a calling for me, knowing that I can prepare for my children in the future world, not by protecting them in the cage, but letting them learn how to live when I'm not there.
Yeah, yeah.
And so one of my favorite story is about the Vietnam pheasant that I find very resonate with my life story. This Vietnam pheasant is Lapura edwardsi. Its color is in very beautiful blue, with red eyes and a white top their head. I would not know the scientific word for it, but that's how we describe it, right? This species, the Vietnam pheasant, was brought to France. A couple of them was brought to France 100 years ago, and they are thriving in the zoo all over Europe. So they have more than 1,000 Vietnam pheasant in Europe and some in the state as well in the zoo. But in Vietnam, this species has not been found in the wild for a very long time. Uh, the latest the latest species that they have seen and determined that these Vietnam pheasant was found in 1998 in Phong Điền National Reserve area in Huế, and since then, no one has found these species in the wild anymore. In the zoo, we have in the zoo in Hanoi about 40 of individual, but none in the wild. So one of our project is to uh, work with the zoo from Europe to bring back species individual pheasant to bring back to Vietnam and to train them for releasing in the wild. So it's a rewilding project. Help me to see myself in this as a person who has traveled outside of Vietnam back then and to return. The project is about homecoming for the pheasant, and it's a very powerful calling as well that Vietnam is here for the species that originally from here to come back.
I love that story. And I remember when we had that coffee together in that cafe and we had that art gallery and we walked out and we saw that painting of that pheasant, remember? And we were like, what, how strange is that just to see the painting of that specific pheasant that you just mentioned about, which has been taken away from Vietnam during the French colonial time and now rehome. with their own rights to the country of their great ancestors of us pheasants. So I found that story very, very inspiring. So really thank you for sharing. So as we know, Vietnam carries both wounds and strength, from history, and we're not going to go there. But Vietnam has a very interesting shape. So it's really shaped like an S. So how do you see Vietnam's role as a catalyst for global conservation? It's really a big question, I know, but I really want us to understand about that.
Vietnam is a very long country, so our biodiversity is very varied. And we ranked number 14 by the Global Biodiversity Index, meaning that we have many species that has been founded, but also many species has not been discovered. And because of the history and the geography of Vietnam, we are blessed with both. One side is the forest species, and then the sea also very wonderful biodiversity, and many places has been ranked at the biosphere reserve, the world biosphere reserve, because from the tropical area we are the evergreen forest. So when, for example, in the northern atmosphere, when there's a winter in Vietnam, we still have evergreen, and then it can absorb a lot of carbon during the winter time. Also, the bird immigrants, they're also stopping by Vietnam for food before they fly down to Indonesia or Australia. So there are also a lot of species that is not from Vietnam but stopping by. And it's very important that they are protected while they are in Vietnam. So when they come to Indonesia, Australia, they can mate during the winter and come back in the spring. And that will be also very important because these birds, they would eat the worms. So we wouldn't have to use so much pesticides if we allow the ecosystem to develop and for the wildlife to work together with us. So how Vietnam is very important to the conservation. I think personally, from my perspective, we have a lot of treasure in this place that we need to protect. And it's not just for our own benefit, but for our neighbor country and even further away in the northern atmosphere where the birds actually coming from. So yeah, so we do see like birds from Russia, birds from China that flew here. They would stop by places like in the Côn Đảo, Phú Quốc, many places. And so far, I think the communication about these wildlife species has not been enough so that people can understand how important it is, that conservation is a shared responsibility. It's just not Vietnam. It's not just me, not just conservation Vietnam that should do conservation, but it's for everyone.
This is so inspiring just to know about, the story of, like animals are transiting in Vietnam as well, to go to Indonesia, Australia. Okay, so let's talk about your challenges, in terms of leadership and really the challenges that we have in Vietnam. So conservation is deeply tied to poverty, policy, and culture. So can you tell us more about what has been your biggest challenge leading conservation project in Vietnam, please?
There are actually many challenges in conservation, especially for women in conservation. Right now, as in 3.5 years, moving from the business world to conservation world, I can say that it's actually more challenging to pursue in conservation than pursuing business like I did before. Because in business, when we have a very clear KPI and timeline, and there are project deadline that we work towards, and there are measurements such as profitability, it's easy to say whether you did it, you fail, you success, and how much percentage of gain or lose. But moving into conservation, I find it's a very different world. We cannot use the leadership in business world and apply in conservation, because right now you see there has been many example or lesson learned from the world that show it didn't work that way. So we cannot do the same and expect the result to be different. For conservation, it's about innovation as well, because we need to change and adapt to many things, not just as in the environment changing, because the weather changes, climate change affect agriculture, and of course it also affect the work in nature itself for the life of the species that has to endure in nature. But one thing is like the climate change, but it's also about structure, the governance. Like if we only rely on the top-down system and if we believe that it's the government job to save our environment or to save our nature, then it's push a lot of the pressure on the top. So now we want to change this from our working together as in for community. It has to come from the community that live in the area, that they can have the way to protect. They have the knowledge, the traditional knowledge of how we should protect the environment or the nature itself. So what I'm trying to say here is about adaptivity. We need adaptive leadership, because if we analyze the challenges and compare it to what is the option we have, we might come just by hitting the wall, because there's no right answer and there's no one size fit all. In business, you can say you have a business model in another country, it has been successful, you bring to Vietnam and apply it, and it can be successful, it can be failed. For conservation, each area is very different. Each community is very different. And in Vietnam, we have 54 ethnic minority. Even though the Kin people like myself who speak Vietnamese fluently, primarily dominate the ethnic groups, the community, are the ones that live their life tied to the nature. And so the challenge for me, even though I speak English, French, and a little bit of Chinese too, but when it's come to conservation, all of those languages would not work, because the communities speak their own language. So I cannot do it all myself. I need to connect to people who can connect to the community to build to start a project. So that's why for Conservation Vietnam, we take care of the funding and communication, but most of our projects are carried out by the local conservation organization. And we do not compete with them in terms of working in the forest or working with the local community to prevent illegal hunting.
How interesting that, you're talking about, connection through the ethnic languages. And yes, and you're very right. We have 54 ethnic here. So it's a very, very good point. So I'm really absolutely learning a lot today. So thank you very much. So you, as a woman leader and now part of the Melinda Gates Women's Emerging Program, how do you see yourself, how do you see your role in shaping the future of women in nature leadership?
So for me, as right now, I'm labeled as a woman leader in conservation and get to represent Vietnam in different groups of women leadership in Southeast Asia and in the world. I get to be in programs such as Women Emerging that connect me with other women everywhere, 60 countries around the world. And another program is about transform leadership transformation in conservation, also connect me with other women and men as well. And then third program I'm currently in is the Now Leader program by ASAP Species that supporting woman leader in conservation in Southeast Asia specifically. I see myself in the position again that I representing my country in specific area that is conservation to reach out and having a voice so the world, the people outside of Vietnam understand that what we need and help to close the gap between the current situation and what we can do in the future with the support from various sector both from conservation and from the private sector. It's an honor, but it's also come with a lot of challenges. That's why I decided to move forward with my master degree in conservation of wildlife, because I would not be able to present something that I do not understand it correctly. Also, I did the master degree not for the degree, but specifically for the knowledge in the field, so that I can communicate correctly what do we need, what are the challenges the women in Vietnam are facing, and what kind of support that we need from our country, and even further is outside of the country, is the world, to support us. We need more people in this field, and especially is the woman, because there are many reasons. So, for example, it could be very notorious that hunting is the main job, right? So many men would hunt even though they know that is an illegal act, because they need to find a way to support their family. But then it's actually the woman who doing the trading. The woman is the one that using they would take the hunting product and sell it to the market or sell it to the restaurant. This has come from a survey that I get to see from the researcher. Before, for conservation, because it's very tough, you have to be in the forest, and the forest in Vietnam with mountains, that is very difficult to travel as a woman. So it's mainly the men who carry out. But for me, I understand that the woman also play an important role, and me showing up at different events, different conference, speaking my voice as a Vietnamese woman in conservation. My wish is to inspire others to join in. I think that the fact that I'm also a mother who looking after two children can also resonate with other women, in the sense that as a mother, we want the best for our children. We want them to have the future where they have the right to see wildlife and inspire from the nature.
I'm with you completely as a mom as well of two daughters. Absolutely. So you are absolutely inspiring me, not just to look for more. And our final question, and this is what we ask all the time to close our podcast to all our guests. So you know that the podcast is called Mosaic Mind. So your mind is tiny pieces, sparkling mosaics of, fragment of identity, stories, mistake, bold choices. For you, what is the glue that holds your mosaic's mind together? What is the glue that all those things which are everywhere make sense for you?
The mosaic minds means that I can be anyone, I can be anywhere, and I can do anything that I can imagine. The piece that the good girl in living in District 3 in Ho Chi Minh City, there's a piece of me in America, in the primary forest connecting to nature of Oregon. And there's a piece of me in Aix-en-Provence, learning about art, famous artists like Cézanne, Vincent van Gogh, and so many other artists. There's also a part of me everywhere in the place that I've been through in Asia doing sales and business. There's a part of me now in South Africa, seeing how people in South Africa is proud of protecting their nature. Then there's also a lot of species of me in the forest that I have been through in Vietnam, knowing that each of them is very precious.
Yeah, it sounds to me like an open mindset and trying to understand what really brings the meaning. So we had an extraordinary conversation today, Mai. So I really thank you for the time. So we really talk, from moving from a safe area, with, a carry path straight, to equity in finances, to adapting, yourself when you were studying overseas, from a protected life, to go somewhere else where you have just to challenge yourself a little bit, to go to healing and understanding what nature does for you, and really trying to understanding that concept through the heart. It's not just about, talking for us is great. It was more than that. That was a deep connection you talked about, which healed you from your sickness. And then you were really talking about something interesting as well, which we're talking about the connection of languages, of the ethnic languages, which are helping you to connect with the nature. So us being Vietnamese kin is very different from understanding the nature and the wildlife if you're not a minority ethnic in Vietnam. So you really raised the point here about having that connection as well. And you talked about your role to help and inspire other women leaders or non-leaders yet and other people as well, through the Melinda Gates program, how you can represent with pride, Vietnam outside of Vietnam, being the voice, because you do represent Vietnam as well. And I really love the fact that you're also saying that, you're doing your master's now, just not for the master's, but, not for the sake of having another degree, but really just having the knowledge which really helped you just to inspire people to get more knowledge, understanding how we can really do conservation in Vietnam. And you also talked about, how Vietnam is shaped like an S, but then all those climate and diversity of Vietnam is actually a great place for us, to be leading the way in terms of conservation in Asia, because as you said, animals are transiting, via Vietnam to go to Indonesia or Australia. So that was a fascinating chat, Mai. Really thank you for sharing all this. So as for the people who are listening today, so if you really enjoy the conservation, please follow, subscribe to Mosaic Mind, wherever you are, and listen to our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and really share that episode with somebody else who cares about, what matters, about leadership, about identity and the future of our planet. So really, thank you very much.